Hello there, welcome back to Planet America's Weekend Edition. Here in the Situation Room, I'm John Barron.
And I'm Licciardello, and we have a situation.
The White House facing more questions over the Jeffrey Epstein case.
They're engaging in a cover-up.
Donald Trump's administration is facing a full rebellion from the MAGA faithful.
Release the Epstein files, am I right?
I feel like we're at a dangerous point now.
Physically, you're gonna puke probably right now.
They're stupid people.
Donald Trump accused of a cover-up over the Epstein files. Could this consume his presidency?
And Trump's done a deal to supply more weapons to Ukraine and make Europe pay for it. But first.
And first this week, to the closest thing President Trump has faced to a revolt from some Republicans, his new media support base and followers on social media. It's all over a widely rumoured list of high-profile clients of sex trafficker and child abuser Jeffrey Epstein.
Investigators say they found no incriminating client list of Epstein's, no credible evidence that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals, and no evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties.
Epstein died in prison awaiting trial in 2019. For years, there's been speculation that his sex crimes implicated famous friends, including Britain's Prince Andrew, former President Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump, who was a friend of Epstein's for years. But the FBI now says there is no such client list. And it also released hours of security footage from Epstein's New York prison in an attempt to quash the theory that Epstein, whose death was ruled a suicide, may have been murdered to silence him. Well, that tape hasn't helped at all because, according to the time codes, there's at least a minute missing.
Look, the video jumps just before 11:59 to midnight. There's 1 full minute missing. Attorney General Pam Bondi tried to explain the missing minute.
Every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing.
In fact, the tech journal Wired magazine says that far from this being raw footage, as the Department of Justice claimed, the metadata reveals that nearly 3 minutes of footage was cut. The Epstein case, of course, has overlapped and fed into this internet-based conspiracy theory first peddled by QAnon, that political elites are running a global cabal of pedophiles trafficking children. There are also claims that Epstein was working for a foreign intelligence agency, blackmailing people with videos of them engaged in illegal sex acts. During last year's presidential campaign, Trump said he would declassify a range of files on a range of issues, including Jeffrey Epstein, although in this Fox News interview he did qualify that. And by the way, that qualification at the end of this clip was edited out of the broadcast version of the interview.
Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah. I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there, because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world. But I think I would, or at least
Do you think that would restore trust? Help restore trust?
Yeah, I don't know about Epstein so much as I do the others. Certainly about the way he died. It would be interesting to find out what happened there, because that was a weird situation and the cameras didn't happen to be working, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I'd go a long way toward that one.
So, in the rest of that, which didn't go to air after the Trump is clearly hedging, already talking about phony stuff that might be in there, sowing doubts, raising eyebrows. But what is the evidence that there is a client list? Here's what Attorney General Pam Bondi said in an interview also on Fox News back in February this year.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So have you seen anything that you said, oh my gosh?
Not yet.
So, John Roberts specifically asked Bondi about an Epstein client list. She responded by saying it was on her desk, but then went on to talk about how she was also reviewing the files on JFK and Martin Luther King. Now, this added fuel to the client list fire, as did Trump's largest financial backer, Elon Musk, who famously spat the dummy over Trump's big, beautiful spending bill with a Twitter tirade, including this parting shot, which he has since deleted.
Time to drop the really big bomb. Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT.
We've seen this week that Donald Trump is clearly very frustrated at a time when he should be doing something of a victory lap over the passage of that big, beautiful domestic policy spending and tax-cutting bill and that short, sharp, if inconclusive strike against the Iranian nuclear program. Reporters keep asking him and his Attorney General about Jeffrey Epstein.
Your memo and release yesterday on Jeffrey Epstein, it left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for an American or foreign intelligence agency. The former Labor Secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Costa, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of the stabbing?
Yeah, sure. If
could I just interrupt for
Sure.
1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years.
Yes, and it was Trump that was doing a lot of the talking, but now it's uncomfortable for the president, and his supporters, including the FBI Director Kash Patel, now say that the Epstein conspiracy theories just aren't true, never have been. Although this is what Kash Patel was claiming before he became Trump's FBI Director.
You say that the FBI has Epstein's list, they're sitting on it. That doesn't seem like something you should do. You're protecting the world's foremost predator. That seems like an evil thing to do, regardless of who may be embarrassed in the release of that list. Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list.
That's loyalty, but the cracks have started to appear. Chaz, Kash Patel's deputy at the FBI, Dan Bongino, a former podcaster, has reportedly had a big blow-up with Pam Bondi over this, maybe threatened to resign. He certainly took last Friday off work when he wasn't supposed to. Speaker Mike Johnson even is now advocating for the full release of any and all files relating to Epstein. But for now, it seems that Donald Trump is digging in his heels, claiming that only bad people want to know who was complicit in Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, and he's likening it now to the FBI and special counsel investigations into the help that Russia gave him during the 2016 election.
Don't forget, we went through years of the Mueller witch hunt and all of the different things, the Steele dossier, which was all fake. All that information was fake. But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think, well, really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information, let them give it. Anything that's credible, I would say, let them have it.
Let them have it? Well, we will see.
Oh, they're having it all right, John. They're having a rather large helping of it. There's even been talk of a potential special counsel compiling an independent report for the White House, although Steve Bannon's suggestion for who that special counsel should be was interesting. Matt Gaetz? I suppose, having been found to regularly pay women for sex and to party with a 17-year-old and to break Florida's statutory rape laws, Matt Gaetz is quite familiar with the other side of the issue, John. Not sure he's the ideal choice, though. Anyway, Caroline Levitt has already ruled out that special counsel, so sorry, Matt. Regardless, the administration might want to do something, because the polling is not good. Data for Progress, which admittedly is a left-wing polling company, asked Republicans whether they approved or disapproved of the Trump administration's handling of the Epstein issue. Amongst those who had heard a lot about the controversy, only 40% approved and 55% disapproved. I have never seen an issue where approval for what Trump's doing was that low amongst Republicans. Having said that, we shouldn't assume that all Republicans are obsessing about Epstein. A lot of Republicans simply don't care. A CNN poll found only 3% of Americans overall were satisfied with the amount of Epstein content that the government has shared. But while 56% of Democrats and 52% of independents are dissatisfied with the amount of content shared, only 40% of Republicans are dissatisfied. Most Republicans either don't know about what's going on with Epstein or don't care. The problem is that Trump's argument, if you have been paying attention, is impossible to take seriously. He reckons that the Epstein files were actually written by Obama, Hillary Clinton, James Comey, ex-CIA head John Brennan, and the Biden administration, even though some of those people have nothing to do with each other. And also, most of them have never even mentioned Epstein, ever. And he asks, why didn't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? which also makes no sense because he's arguing that they made up the files and then did not release them for some reason, just leave them lying around in secret. Also, he's completely contradicting Pam Bondi, who is arguing that there are no Epstein files anywhere. Trump's saying, no, they exist all right, but they're all made up by Democrats. Even though until 5 minutes ago, Trump was the one saying they should be released. No wonder this was Trump's first ever post on Truth Social to receive more replies than likes. His first ever ratio. That's not good. Also, Trump says that the whole story is boring. You played that grab before, right? So he's saying that there was a plot involving two ex-presidents, a former First Lady, the head of the FBI, the head of the CIA, and the entire Biden administration to frame the future president in a pedophile sex ring run by a mysterious billionaire. And the reason to not ask questions about that is because that's so boring. None of this makes sense, but he hasn't stopped there. Now he's accusing any Republicans who don't believe his obvious garbage of being past supporters. He's excommunicated them from MAGA, and he said, I don't want their support anymore. This is pure gaslighting about one of possibly the MAGA crowd's most intensely held beliefs, John, and I don't think it's going to work. Meanwhile, the Democrats are trying to sink the boot in wherever they can, asking what Trump's got to hide. Probably my favourite Democratic reaction, though, has to be from House Rep Hank Johnson, who had to fight very hard to attract attention amongst this massive garbage pile, but he found a way to do it.
Epstein died by suicide. Believe that and you must be blind. You've been telling us you released the file, but where are they? We've gone along with what's been told. We've had plenty of time, you're in control. But now you say you will withhold the Epstein file.
Keep practicing, Hank. The question is, what happens from here? Unlike what Pam Bondi's suggesting, there might be something there that could be publicly released. At least that's what Alan Dershowitz reckons, and he has literally seen a lot of the evidence. He was defending himself in court as an alleged perpetrator.
So let me tell you, I know for a fact documents are being suppressed. And they're being suppressed to protect individuals. I know the names of the individuals. I know why they're being suppressed. I know who's suppressing them. But I'm bound by confidentiality from a judge and cases, and I can't disclose what I know. But I hand to God, I know the names of people whose files are being suppressed in order to protect them. And that's wrong.
So there you go. Democratic House Rep Ro Khanna tried to pass a motion in the House to force more transparency, asking why the Epstein files still hidden? Who are the rich and powerful being protected? I'm introducing an amendment to force a vote demanding the full Epstein files be released to the public. In the end, that went nowhere because the specific amendment would have given Democrats control of the House floor. 0 Republicans were going to support that. But constant nuisance for Trump, Republican Thomas Massie has now joined the fray, and he supported Ro Khanna in pushing a discharge petition to force a vote on the House floor specifically into whether they release the complete files. So it will be interesting to see what happens there, John, especially as you noted, Mike Johnson himself is on the record now supporting more transparency.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if there's a Epstein client list or not in physical form, in his handwriting, there is an Epstein list of sort. It's in Alan Dershowitz's head and Ghislaine Maxwell's head, his partner in crime, who's in prison for 20 years and sees this potentially as a way of getting out of jail early if she names names.
And if there's no list, there's got to be some kind of evidence of something somewhere that could be released, sure.
Certainly. And earlier today, we did see something of a concession from President Trump ordering Pam Bondi to release grand jury testimony from the Epstein investigation, the sort of stuff that Dershowitz was talking about. That does still fall short of releasing all the files. But the White House has admitted to one thing, Chaz. We can confirm the president has cankles. After photos of Trump with swollen ankles and bruised hands did the rounds online this week, they have admitted that the president has circulatory issues. Nothing at all serious, they say. A lot of people Trump's age get it, the doctor says, but of course that won't convince anyone who wants to believe that he's at death's door with heart failure, and that's kind of how conspiracy theories get started and never ever end.
You can't disprove a cover-up.
Exactly. You can possibly just give them a better conspiracy theory to believe, which is what Trump's trying to do at the moment. For more on all of this, I spoke to historian Matthew Dallek. He has written extensively about American political and social movements, and his most recent book is on the secretive right-wing John Birch Society. He's Professor of Political Management at George Washington University. Matt Dallek, welcome to Planet America. I wonder why it is, do you think, that of all the conspiracy theories over the years that Donald Trump has helped to fuel, that, to extend the analogy, this is the one that has caught fire and is now burning him?
It's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with the buildup, because Trump and the FBI director, Kash Patel, and many others for years have been peddling this conspiracy theory that Epstein maintained a client list, the government had a hold of it, and on that list were liberals, Democrats, other elites, and that the government had conspired to cover it up, and they had also murdered Epstein. It wasn't a suicide. So it's a very lurid tale, but the tale, I think, also resonates with much of Trump's base, because ultimately it's a story about one of Trump's signature issues, namely that the so-called deep state has conspired over many years to protect the elites, to defend the establishment, and to destroy the lives of ordinary people and do horrible things like protect a sex trafficker like Jeffrey Epstein. So it really resonates. Trump peddled it for years, and then lo and behold, he gets into power after this massive buildup, right? It's like the fight of the century almost, if we think about like a boxing match. And he gets into power, and lo and behold, there's nothing. There's a nothing burger. There are other factors as well. I think that the rollout, the promise by the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, of a client list of information she was going to divulge, that turned out also to be a huge dud. But I think that the fact that it resonated so much with his supporters as a lurid tale of deep government corruption, and then Trump in power has not been able to produce it. So it's a real disappointment to a lot of his most ardent supporters.
And Matt, how do you see this conflation between some of the realities of the Epstein case, the pure sort of speculation around Epstein, and then that sort of completely wacky QAnon conspiracy theory about a powerful cabal of elites running a child sex trafficking ring out of the basement of Comet Pizza there in Washington?
Yeah, well, each conspiracy theory, on some level, the conspiracy theories share certain aspects. So usually conspiracy entrepreneurs know their product. They know how to sell their product. They know how to market it, and they make a lot of money off it, right? It's a big business. There are also other elements, right, of someone very powerful, a powerful entity keeping, ordinary people down, hiding the truth from the American people. Often it involves the government, right? The federal government, this suspicious entity way off in Washington, D.C. But each theory, some are more plausible than others. So Comet Pizza, which actually my 13-year-old wanted me to order from there today, where this supposed child sex ring occurred, that was more way out there than most. I mean, there was it was really insane. It's a pizza place, like a family pizza joint. There was very little, if anything, to it. Epstein is another matter. He was an actual sex trafficker. It looks like he did conspire with some people, including one of his assistants, who's now sitting in jail in Florida, to traffic young girls. He was incredibly rich, and so he was pictured with the likes of Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. So there are, kind of loose elements, loose threads. But at the end of the day, the central allegation that, there's this client list that Epstein maintained. It was explosive. It had the names of very powerful people on it, and the government was hiding it, and that the government had murdered him to keep this quiet. that's where you really take off from reality. So, you're right. There are shards of truth in conspiracy theories. Sometimes the shard is bigger than in other theories, but ultimately they are divorced from reality. And I think that the reason why Trump is so unable to produce anything is because there is nothing. There's nothing to produce.
It seems, though, Matt, that there was always an inherent risk in the Epstein case for Donald Trump, given their at least decade-and-a-half friendship. There could be some perceived guilt by association. Why do you think he even dabbled with this in the first place? Because he certainly wants nothing to do with it now.
That's an interesting question. I mean, look, with Trump, the motivations are a little hard to discern. Obviously, you can't really peer into his thought process. My sense is that it's a little more scattershot than that. I mean, Trump will glom on to any number of conspiracy theories that cross his transom, let's say on Truth Social, right? They cross his desk. So, the birther conspiracy theory, the election was stolen on January 6th, the QAnon conspiracy theory, Epstein, there are many, many others. And, Trump, frankly, has probably met very few conspiracy theories that he has rejected. It's usually the opposite of that. So I think that this had the elements of a lurid story that also would resonate with him and his base, because it was a story about government deception, government crimes. And as a result, he ran with it. And also, he may have also been influenced by the likes of podcasters, MAGA bloggers, MAGA social media stars who are also promoting this theory. They latched onto it as well. And so he's going to, ride the tiger, as it were, and he does ride it. But of course, there are typically at least some consequences. You peddle a conspiracy theory, usually there's some kind of blowback, and we're seeing that now.
So ultimately, you're saying that you don't agree with the likes of Laura Loomer, who say that this could consume Trump's presidency. Does this really just not matter that much at all?
Well, look, first of all, far be it from me to predict what Trump's base is going to do. I mean, political observers I would just caution people that in the United States, observers have been wondering, speculating, and frankly predicting that part of Trump's base is going to revolt. They were going to move away from him over the past 10 years. And it hasn't really happened. So could Epstein do it? Maybe. But I actually think that an economic fallout from his tariffs are more likely to consume his presidency than Jeffrey Epstein. The Epstein story, though, could prove more politically problematic if his supporters feel like they're being betrayed on not just Epstein, but on other issues, whether that is tariffs or mass deportations, which Trump has promised and is carrying out, or if he continues to support Ukraine by sending military equipment there after saying he wasn't going to do that. The bombing of Iran, right? There are ways in which his supporters feel like they were sold a bill of goods. Then the Epstein story, I think, becomes another political problem, part of that narrative. But I'd just be cautious about predicting that, Epstein is going to consume his presidency somehow. It seems it's possible, but it just seems a little bit far removed from, our experiences over the past decade with Trump.
President Trump has made almost as many head-spinning decisions and reversals in Ukraine policy as he has on trade and tariffs. Last week, Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth suddenly announced a pause in already approved arms shipments, citing a shortage in US stockpiles depleted by aid and sales to both Ukraine and Israel. That took even the White House by surprise. Hegseth reportedly did not inform the White House, and Trump promptly overruled him. And shipments were soon restarted. The affair, though, not only further undermined faith in Hegseth, but cast further doubt on the Trump administration's resolve. NATO Chief Mark Rutte went to the White House for talks with President Trump, who announced that Russia has 50 days to agree to a ceasefire or face far-reaching sanctions. And he also had a very Trumpy workaround for military aid to Ukraine: make the Europeans buy American weapons to give to Ukraine. But ultimately, Chaz, it seems that Trump sees this agreement as more of a bargaining chip to force Putin back to the negotiating table to end the war.
Yeah, things seem to have changed quite rapidly a few weeks ago when Putin and Trump had a disastrous phone call, apparently. Trump was pushing for a ceasefire, as he does, but according to Trump, he was very disappointed with the conversation that they had because Trump said, "I don't think he's there. I don't think he's there, and I'm very disappointed. I'm just saying, I don't think he's looking to stop, and that's too bad." And Trump was significantly more direct about his disappointment publicly.
I don't know, we get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
He's developed quite the potty mouth in the last few weeks. And Trump's patience was tested even further when Putin responded to Trump's concerns by ramping up his attacks on Ukraine even further. A year ago, Russia might fire off 10 to 25 drones a night, with the odd cruise or ballistic missile attack every now and then. But the day after Trump's bullshit comments, Russia launched the biggest aerial attack of the war. We're talking 728 drones and 13 missiles in one night. The next day, it was 397 drones, 10 cruise missiles and 8 of the especially deadly ballistic missiles. So Putin was kind of rubbing Trump's nose in it there, and it might well have backfired. There are limits, though, to how quickly these weapons can get to Ukraine. Germany, for example, has already committed to purchasing 2 Patriot missile batteries for Ukraine, but Ukraine might not actually see those systems for a number of months. Also, America isn't exactly made of weaponry right now. It apparently only has about 25% of the Patriot missile interceptors that it needs for all of the Pentagon's military plans after burning through stockpiles in the Middle East in recent months. So there is that. Also, even now, Trump doesn't seem to have gone all the way to the other side against Russia. You spoke about the sanctions that Trump is threatening before, and yes, 100% tariffs on countries that trade with Russia, that could be incredibly effective. But at the same time, Trump is still refusing to support a bipartisan bill that would impose even tougher sanctions on Russia, including 500% tariffs on countries that do business with Moscow. That bill has more than 80 supporters in the Senate at the moment, but Trump is still holding off. Admittedly, he does say that 100% tariffs, 500% tariffs, they're all kind of the same thing. They're going to basically end trade completely. So he might be right about that. But the fact that Trump's still holding off on supporting the Senate bill, I think that's notable. Either way, though, John, things have changed. Trump's gaslighting is now, well, it's going the other way to what it used to do, acting like he's always been the one who's been a Putin skeptic. It was the other presidents who fell for his charms.
Fooled a lot of people. He fooled Bush. He fooled a lot of people. He fooled Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden. He didn't fool me.
Sure. What Ukraine could really do with, though, John, is a bit more consistency. Trump being hot on Russia, cold on Russia, back and forth. Ukraine needs to know what weapons are coming and when, so they can plan for 2 weeks' time or 6 months' time or a year's time. It's almost worse than being cut off, to be on and off and on and off with their weaponry. And I think that's getting them down.
Yeah, and this is where the Europeans are trying to sort of move into that void of certainty, and also why the Italians and the French are saying, you know what, we're actually not going to start buying American weapons to give Ukraine. We're going to start ramping up our own domestic arms production, because all the European nations are now saying we've got to spend more on our own defence because we can't rely on America anymore. Let's get an expert opinion on all of this from defence strategist Mackenzie Eaglen. She has been a military preparedness and spending advisor to the US House, Senate and Pentagon, as well as serving on numerous boards and defence review panels. Mackenzie, welcome to Planet America's Situation. And what's your take on this new model of military aid? Buy American from the Europeans, give to the Ukrainians. Is it sustainable? Is it useful?
I think largely it's both. Basically, the reason it's the model at all is because Europe needs our permission to transfer weapons to Ukraine for a variety of reasons in previous agreements. And so it's kind of a backdoor way to have Europe invest, of course, in the American industrial base, although not hopefully at its own expense. And it's a way to signal burden sharing and all of that. But basically, U.S. weapons are what's needed in particular. We have, I don't know a weapon in the world that's comparable to the Patriot air defense. This is probably the Trump model going forward, and it's better than no model.
Mackenzie, how long will this process of selling weapons through NATO take? Does this mean Ukraine isn't getting weapons till 2027, say, or could it be sooner?
So it's going to depend on the weapon. And of course, most of these really are, these are actual weapons, missiles, things that blow up in particular. Unclear, there may be some 155s in there. There may be some offensive weapons. But it just depends on what batch of capability we're talking about. So, for example, if it's stuff that we have on hand, it could be there in weeks. So that's, previously that would have been drawdown authority. If these were capabilities that we all know, have heard about now, that were stuck on the tarmac in Poland, that could even be days. If it's something that's with a third party somewhere and it's in, it needs to be put into long, sort of short-term maintenance, a layup, for example. Some of the weapons I think that will be transferred from Israel would fall into this category. That's going to take months. And then if it's the sort of put it in your Amazon cart from American companies, you'll get to jump to the front of the line, but it's still put your order in and hope for the best. That will take years.
President Trump has said that Ukraine should not use any of these new weapons against Moscow itself. What do you think of the drawing of red lines like that?
I'm always uncomfortable with red lines as just a general rule. They're not really helpful, whether it's serious chemical weapons or do this, don't do that to another military. I often think the United States would never allow itself to be told what to do. I understand this is a unique exception when they're in need of our support and capability. So it's a little bit different. We're not talking apples to oranges here, but it does, like most restrictions on Ukraine, it tends to, I don't want to say it's one full hand tied behind their back, but it's not helpful. If it were our military, we would want the freedom of maneuver space for decision making, and I guess literally, pun intended, for the battlefield.
Now, Trump said he'd send up to 17 Patriot missile batteries, but what does that mean in terms of actual missile interceptors? Because Russia's firing like 10 missiles a day at the moment.
Right. So again, a little bit unclear here, not unusual for the Trump administration, but I think he might mean 12. And I think these mean, batteries, essentially, 12 missile batteries. And in many cases, these are the capabilities that will probably need to be sort of taken off the rack, put through a probe, what we call probe testing, maybe a short amount of maintenance as well, and then sent over to Ukraine. So this might be in the months category. Is it going to be enough? I don't think we've ever given Ukraine enough.
So as well as those Patriot missile systems, what other weaponry would you say Ukraine is in greatest need of?
So there are a couple other of weapons like that have become, strangely in my world, because this is what we do for a living, but now it's sort of household names. So for example, ATACMS, GMLRS, prisms. These are all, many of these are considered defensive weapons or air defense specifically, which is, I think, right now probably the single greatest battlefield need. The Russian drone barrages have dramatically increased in terms of numbers of drones used per mission. And so while it may not be, enough, it's better than nothing. It was unclear 6 months ago if this administration would provide any additional military aid to Ukraine beyond what was committed previously, which is still flowing to some extent. So, I don't want to sound too negative. I think it's helpful to get anything that you can. The Ukrainians are quite innovative, as we all know. For the most part, again, these are missiles and air defense munitions in particular, which is great. There may be some artillery also coming over as well. The details of these packages aren't yet fully clear, but we have the broad strokes that it's mostly munitions.
Mackenzie, does Ukraine still have more weapons coming from Biden, or have those been fully tapped out?
I believe there's still a flow coming from President Biden that was previously approved, like some of the weapons that are in Poland currently. That was, or different packages from earlier in either this year or approved last year that have just now sort of worked their way through the pipeline. Not too unusual. That pipeline, though, is coming to an end here pretty much momentarily.
For more than 3 years now, Mackenzie, we've heard this refrain that Ukraine is not being given enough aid to win the war, just enough to stave off defeat. Is that where we are now, or is it worse than that? Is Ukraine still destined to lose this war?
I believe, yes, there's no certainty in life. What's the saying? Except death and taxes. Yes. So basically, until it's over, Ukraine is at risk of losing the war every day until there's some sort of termination of hostilities. And do I think that this potentially administration is different than the last? You know, the European commitments at the the NATO summit and the agreement to go ahead and work through this new deal that we've been speaking about today, I think are really encouraging signs. The one thing I would look at as a key takeaway is, will Europe take risk in its own stockpiles of patriots? That will probably answer your question better than anything I could come up with, not being a military commander. But that's going to be a pivotal capability to provide to the Ukrainians right now, not just what we have on hand, but what Europe also has on its own. That's going to be pretty important. But yes, they're at risk of losing. Do I think that it's possible they can continue to hold the line until some sort of forced or negotiated settlement? Yes, and I'm hopeful that is the case.
Mackenzie Eaglen, thanks for being with us on Planet America.
Thanks, John. It was good to be with you.
Since its first news broadcast on radio in 1930, America's CBS has been one of the most credible and influential voices in journalism, typified by Edward R. Murrow's live descriptions of the German bombing of London during World War II.
The fires up the river had turned the moon blood red. The smoke had drifted down till it formed a canopy over the Thames.
And his dissection of a demagogue, Joseph McCarthy, and his anti-communist witch hunts.
We must remember always that accusation is not proof, and that conviction depends upon evidence and due process of law.
For decades, the measured gravitas of CBS's Walter Cronkite brought America the news good and bad.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
And in 1968, CBS launched the news magazine show 60 Minutes.
This is 60 Minutes,
which went on to become one of the highest rating programs in the history of television.
I think that my handling of the press in that campaign was not as effective as it could have been.
Their roster of 60 Minutes reporters reads like a who's who of American broadcast journalism. Mike Wallace, Harry Reasoner, Dan Rather, Diane Sawyer, Roger Mudd, Connie Chung, Leslie Stahl, Ed Bradley, which is part of the reason why this is so stunning.
CBS's parent company Paramount Global and President Donald Trump have reached a $16 million settlement over a lawsuit alleging election interference.
Trump sued CBS's parent company Paramount, alleging 60 Minutes edited Kamala Harris to make her look better. At one point, Trump was demanding $20 billion in alleged damages. Independent experts said there was no merit to the case. Journalists edit answers all the time when politicians, including Trump, waffle and waste time. So why pay Trump $16 million?
They were in need of federal approval for a merger that the owner of Paramount is looking toward right now, so it appeared clear that she was open to an agreement of this kind.
The agreement being pay Trump the money, and his administration is more likely to let the merger worth $8 billion go ahead. It looked an awful lot like a shakedown and a bribe.
Damn me!
Current CBS journalists like John Dickerson are grappling with what this settlement means for their network's credibility.
Can you hold power to account after paying it millions? Can an audience trust you when it thinks you've traded away that trust? The audience will decide that.
And it's not just CBS that's paying the president to make similar dubious lawsuits go away.
Stephanopoulos said on air that Trump had been found liable for rape in the E. Jean Carroll case.
Judges and two separate juries have found him liable for rape,
when in fact Trump had been found civilly liable for sexual abuse.
It was a distinction without a difference. The judge in Trump's trial said what the jury found Trump did was, in fact, rape as commonly understood. But ABC America still wrote a $15 million check to Trump's future presidential library to make it all go away. And back in January, Meta paid Trump $25 million to settle a case that he brought in 2021 after suspending him from Facebook and Instagram in the wake of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Most of that money is also going to the Trump library. And I guess they'll need to build a big one to house that free Qatari Air Force One. Meanwhile, global not-for-profit news agency The Associated Press was banned from the Trump White House for retaining the Gulf of Mexico as the internationally recognised name of that body of water off America's south coast, after President Trump redubbed it the Gulf of America.
The Gulf of America, what a beautiful name.
In June, the DC Court of Appeals ruled the White House has the latitude to exclude any journalist it chooses from the Oval Office and other restricted areas, including on the basis of a news outlet's viewpoint.
You know my opinion of the media, it's very low.
All of which raises some very important questions, not just about Trump's legally very questionable monetisation of the power of the presidency, but also the effect that news organisations paying the president to settle frivolous lawsuits will have. Earlier today, it was announced that CBS is cancelling The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Colbert has become a constant critic of Donald Trump, mocking him on a nightly basis and, in doing so, topping the ratings. It is the only late-night show to grow its audience this year, but CBS is now pulling the plug. And that's all for another weekend edition of Planet America. We'll be back at the same time on ABC News next week.
And there's no Wednesday night edition on ABC TV. In fact, we're on the move to Monday nights from August 4. We'll be on at 9:30 p.m, right after Four Corners and Media Watch. And do not forget to PEP, brand new PEP podcast out now. See you there.
Bye-bye.